Hello, bonjour, and welcome to the Don't Waste Water podcast. I'm your host, Antoine Walter, and in today's episode, I'm excited to welcome Abdulla Alshehhi as my guest. Abdulla is the Managing Director of National Advisor Bureau Limited, the CEO of Q2 General Cleaning, and the Business Support Section Head at GASCO. But you'll see that what dominates the discussion that follows is that Abdulla Alshehhi leads an incredible, over-the-top, and who knows, maybe insane project harvesting an Antarctic iceberg, towing it to Fujairah in the United Arab Emirates and crush it for its water to one day, if all of that succeeds, green a desert and ultimately fight global warming. The interview that follows is the second part of a triptych that starts with my YouTube video on iceberg water, and that will close in 2 weeks with my interview with Alan Condron, a climate modeler and research scientist for the Woods Hole Oceanic Institution. For today, Abdulla Alshehhi will reveal how the idea, extensively investigated in the 1970s to bring an iceberg in the Arab Peninsula, may now really become feasible, and how Antarctic icebergs may represent a sound source of water for the ever-increasing thirst of our world. Abdulla will take us through the details of his project, from the technical side to the financial part, through the proof of concept he intends to run. There's much more in that discussion, but I've already talked too much in this introduction, so I'll let you dive into it in a second. But right before, I need to remind you to share that podcast with your colleagues and friends. Please do it, and I'll meet you on the other side.
You're listening to Don't Waste Water, the podcast that helps water professionals to improve their wastewater treatment, optimize their operation costs, and keep up with the latest market trends. This podcast is brought to you by GF Piping Systems. As a leading supplier of piping systems made of plastics and metal, GF Piping Systems is the global expert for the safe and reliable transportation of water, chemicals, and gas. For more information, visit gfps.com.
Hi Abdulla, welcome to the show. I'm very happy to have you today for many reasons, one of which being that you're working on a project which I find pretty fascinating, and the other being that you're a man full of creativity and ideas. You have an electrical engineering background, if I recall right. So can you just guide us through your steps?
Yeah, I'm electrical and electronic engineer. I've graduated from the University of Huddersfield in the United Kingdom back in 2001. Then I joined an oil company in Abu Dhabi called ADNOC. And then I established several companies, one of which is Q2. And I am as well the managing director for the National Advisor Bureau Limited, a consultancy firm based in Abu Dhabi, which is specialized in water projects as well as creative projects.
When you say water project, which kind of project do you cover?
We cover both in saving and new resources for what unconventional water resources, such as the iceberg, UAE iceberg project is one of our projects we are currently working on.
So I think you cracked a major spoiler that is going to be the heart of our discussion today. And actually, I have to be very honest with you. The first time I heard of an iceberg project, iceberg as drinking water source, I was thinking, no, come on, that cannot be serious. And then the more I read about it, the more it sounded like crazy that no one ever did it yet, because it sounds such an incredible opportunity. And I was wondering, when is the first time you encountered this idea of bringing an iceberg as a source of drinking water?
Back in 2013, I've started writing a book called Filling the Empty Quarter. The book details several projects related to water harvesting and water saving. And the mission for that book is to make the empty quarter desert, which is the second largest desert in the world, make it again green. And to make it green, we need the magic, what they call substance, which is water. So I was researching different projects, and it struck me the iceberg project. So I learned that back in 1975, a French scientist called Georges Mogain have proposed the idea of towing an iceberg to Saudi Arabia, to His Highness Prince Mohammed Al Faisal of Saudi Arabia, for the iceberg to be a water resource for the kingdom. And they established a company called the International Iceberg Harvesting with a $100 million capital. But unfortunately, due to technical issues, they stopped the project, I think, in 1977. I thought the project with now 2000, what we are in 21, the technical difficulties which was faced by the project team back in 1970s is no more valid. So that's why I started researching and studying the project in depth in order to make it for the United Arab Emirates.
What were the technical difficulties they had in 1977?
Well, the Saudis faced two problems. One of the issue is the availability of towing tugboats enough at that year to tow the iceberg. But currently we have hundreds of very strong tugboats which can help us on the operation. The second issue is the depth of the iceberg. The iceberg on average can go up to 150 meters in depth. So they were not able to bring it to the Red Sea due to the shallowness of the water over there. And Saudi Arabia does not have a coast on the Arabian Sea. While we are in the United Arab Emirates, we have, so we can do it. Yani. So this is two of the main difficulties they faced. I visited George Mogain in 2017 to learn from him about the project, and they have made a very strong study about it, and they made a computer simulation in order to identify the best ways of technically making the project feasible.
That is the project he made with Dassault System, right? In the beginning of the 2000s.
Correct, yeah. He worked with Dassault System in order to stimulate the best way of making this project possible.
So you met him in 2017 and you wanted to pursue on somehow his dream. He was dreaming for that for 40 years. And you took on this modeling he was making with Dassault System and also the project of the 70s. And you said, okay, I can take the better out of those two words and make my own project in the Emirates.
Correct. Actually, after our meeting, I've studied the project in different angles of patent technology, which I think will help into making the project more introducing, first of all, the melting rate of the iceberg while in transit, and to making it more feasible from a technical point of view.
So if I got it right when I was reading some papers to prepare for a discussion, you have a unique way to tow that iceberg. You've been patenting a device which is specially addressing the way you tow the iceberg. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Maybe I cannot detail the technical part of it because the patent is still under review.
Under review?
Pending patent. So, but what I can tell you that the technology which we are working on will reduce the melting rate and will help mitigate some of the risk related to the iceberg operation, like utilizing green energy while transporting the iceberg, utilizing the wind for guiding the iceberg as well, in order to reduce the fuel consumption during the transit of these icebergs. But let me highlight as well, maybe why we need water from iceberg in the first place. Currently, due to global warming, many icebergs disintegrate from Antarctica. And once they disintegrate and they leave Antarctica, they float in the ocean and they melt, wasting billions of gallons of the world's most important substance, which is fresh water. The water in Antarctica and North Pole as well is one of the world's most freshest water. Unfortunately, currently is melting, wasted, unutilized. So the idea of making use of what nature offers us, I think, will help us big time.
So what you're saying here is that ice is melting anyways, because that's a bit what I was alluding to in the very beginning of that conversation, was when I was saying, it sounded like strange to me to go and catch icebergs. But actually what I discovered when reading what you were writing and when seeing your interviews is that those icebergs are melting anyways, and they are out there. And if you don't catch them, they're actually wasted.
Exactly. Otherwise, I mean, it will waste not billions, trillions of gallons of the world's fresh water. The global crisis related to water issue is increasing year by year due to population increase. So the water demand all over the globe is in big, is a very necessary to find the new resources. And the issue is due to global warming. We are having this problem. So what shall we leave the iceberg melts unutilized, or shall we try and make use of it in order to make the earth greener and fight the global warming one way or another, if you see what I mean?
On that topic of global warming and greening the earth, in your book, you mention several ideas of sources of water, and you said that iceberg is one of them. Is your intent today still to float an iceberg to the Emirates to green the desert, or is it to bring that iceberg to produce drinking water?
The main purpose of bringing icebergs is for freshwater purpose. However, if we manage and succeed to bring one iceberg and we demonstrated that is doable, I think the water resource will be in abundance. We will have plenty of water to make the not only the empty quarter desert, but all lands into green lands. We have plenty and so much water, which is currently wasted.
So you need to bring one to make a proof of concept, and that way, then you can have thousands of them. How many of these icebergs are produced by Antarctica every year?
I don't have an exact number actually at the top of my mind, but I believe it is in the thousands.
You mentioned that you met Georges Mougin. Did you also have the chance to meet the Prince Mohammed bin Faisal Al Saud?
Unfortunately, he passed away.
And are you working with Georges Mougin, or did he give you some advice? What's your relationship to him?
I did learn a lot from him, honestly, and we were in discussion of having joint working, what do you call it, mechanism together. But unfortunately, we have different way and different mechanism. That's why we did not go through together. Yeah.
And regarding your own iceberg project, what is the current status?
We are currently in the stage of launching a company related to water resources, which will handle the iceberg project financing purpose. So we are into looking for investors.
I read about your project that you had some partners company, one being in Switzerland. And is that still valid, or did you already have some partners there?
We did sign several MOUs with the major companies worldwide. I mean, we've signed with the Khalifa University in Abu Dhabi for the research and development. And through them, we met with MIT team in order to see the technical part of it. And in terms of companies, I would prefer not to disclose names currently, sure, because we have signed an MOU and confidentiality agreement with them.
So that means, if I get you right, in the 70s, the project was around, but there were technical issues. Those technical issues now are sorted. You even have a modelization that shows that the actual towing is possible, and you need to make a proof of concept in order to then make it wider. But talking of that proof of concept, do you intend to take an iceberg and to bring it directly to the Emirates? Or do you want to make a first proof of concept where you would be going somewhere in the South Hemisphere?
Our intention or the plan is to have the project in 2 phases. The first phase would be a pilot run with a smaller iceberg, and we will be towing it to either Perth in Australia, West Australia, or to Cape Town in South Africa. By that, we will strengthen the technical part, and we will ensure that all risks are mitigated. Of course, we will learn from it in order to start the second phase, which is to the United Arab Emirates. The journey from the place we were intending to harvest iceberg to Perth or South Africa may take 3 to 4 months, while to the United Arab Emirates can take up to 9 months. the United Arab Emirates, we are intending to bring a bigger iceberg in order to supply more water.
Talking of Cape Town, I've seen that there's another project around in Cape Town, which is led by Nick Sloan. Do you have links to that other iceberg towing project?
Well, I've met Mr. Sloan back, I think, in 2018 as well, but we are separate entities.
The reason why I'm asking is that when I was reading all those papers and scientific research and documents, I mean, as I was already saying, it sounds quite surprising that no one ever just did it just to try it out. And if we take that as an assumption that someone has to make a proof of concept, then somehow whoever it is, if it's you or if it's another team doing it, it can only help the full market to open up. Because if all of a sudden it becomes possible, then there's no barrier anymore. And then you can start harvesting those wasted source of water. Do you see it that way, or is it important to be the first team to do it?
Well, it is important to supply water to the ever-increasing demand all over the world.
Very right.
Whoever did it first, for me personally, is not an important issue. However, of course, whoever will do it first will enter into history of such a project. But I see it from a humanitarian point of view and from an environmental point of view. We need to find a new water resource for humanity. The population is increasing, and the global warming is not helping us at all. So much problems around the world is due to global warming. We need to make the earth green again. In addition to the financial and commercial aspect of the project, but however, I have a personal, environmental, and a humanitarian purpose out of it.
Regarding that purpose, and I mean, if you look to the projections, they say that in 2030, the world will lack roughly 40% of the water we need to sustain our increased population, as you very rightly said. And a part of that gap is expected to be filled, especially in arid places, with desalination, be it seawater desalination or brackish water desalination, water reuse, and unconventional way to harvest water. But if you look at the ecological balance, it sounds even more interesting to harvest an iceberg, which is not producing byproducts, compared to desalination, which is producing brines, which are rejected to the sea. Does that also enter into your project and into your way of thinking?
Of course. Currently, the water resources, not only in the United Arab Emirates, but throughout the Gulf, is from desalination plants. We are one of the biggest desalination. We have the biggest desalination plants in the world, because we have an increasing population and we don't have much water resources. Unfortunately, the desalination plants not only pollute the air, but they pollute the ocean as well by dumping hundreds of millions of brine water, which is brackish water, very salty, which is not helping the marine in the Gulf. It's not, I believe, is not a long-term solution to the problem. We have a water which is wasted currently and melting on the ocean, while we are capitalizing upon a technology which is making the matter even worse by making the global warming issue harder.
On the other hand, desalination is an engineering topic. If you're an engineer, you see desalination, you understand there is a physical rationale, and you don't have so much to do with nature. You take salty water and you have a very much controlled process and you make drinking water out of it. Whereas if you take an unconventional way, be it iceberg harvesting, be it atmospheric water generation or whatever, you have much more nature involved, which is something you have much more difficulties to control, obviously. Did you have contact with the water industry in general, with the technical players around there, and what was their reaction to your project of towing an iceberg?
Well, we've met with several parties and worldwide players in the water industry. When we presented them the project, they were convinced about the possibility or the feasibility of the technical part of the project. So they see the demand of water is increasing worldwide year by year. And we think we can play together a vital role into helping the population of the world mitigate the water shortage issue.
And what about the financial side of your project? Did you make an estimate of how much it would cost to bring an iceberg to the Emirates? And if you take that cost and you make it a cost per cubic meter, do you have an idea of where you will land in terms of cost of the water you will produce?
Our studies show that the water per gallon is cheaper than the desalination plants, water produced by desalination plants. And the estimated project value for the pilot run to either Australia or South Africa may cost from $60 to $80 million, while to the United Arab Emirates, we estimate it may cost $120 up to $200 million. Our study shows the project is financially feasible, in addition to the technical part of feasibility.
When you say it's cheaper than desalination, is it cheaper? How much cheaper would you say?
I would not prefer to disclose numbers for that part,
But in terms of financial value, you say it's cheaper than desalination?
From a technical, it's either because we have a variable cost, which is the cost of fuel for the tugboats. Mm-hmm. This is a variable cost which will play a big role into calculating how much per gallon per water we supply to consumers. However, our study shows the water supplied will be either cheaper or equal to the desalination plants, to be specific.
On top of which you have the ecological impact, which is probably different. I mean, better in the sense there's no brines which are rejected to the sea, but now you have a mass of ice which is floating in tropical waters. Do you think that will have an incidence?
There will be an environmental assessment study was done, and have concluded there will be a minimal effect to the presence of this iceberg on the water. We are talking about a drop of water on the ocean. The Indian Ocean is the world's largest ocean, and these icebergs is small, peanuts to compare to the size, if you see what I mean. So the study shows a minimal effect to the ecosystem as well as the environment.
In one of your interviews, I heard you explaining that there might be also positive ecological impact, because if you have a mass of cold air at that certain localized place, it might have an influence on clouds and meteorological aspects. I'm by no means a meteorologist, so I have no clue if I'm saying something that makes even remotely sense here. But did you have a look at that?
When we launched the project back in 2017 and we announced it in the news, some researchers have contacted us and they have highlighted something which I believe is more crazy than the iceberg project itself. They told us and the presence of these iceberg, and they are cold bodies in the warm water of the Arabian Sea, will create a microclimate. How these iceberg being cold bodies, they will attract the floating clouds in the Arabian Sea to its center, causing a vortex mechanism until making these clouds heavier until they will rain. And they will rain continuously throughout the year as long as the reason for it, which is the iceberg, the cold body, is present. I am not a meteorologist, but I have researched about it, and it seems it's to some extent scientifically makes sense. This, of course, needs further studies. That's why we are in the discussion with the research center in order to confirm what we are saying.
Well, it's exactly the conclusion I had myself, which was it sounds to make sense, but probably it's the kind of thing which needs a proof of concept. So I think all these routes lead to the same thing, which is you have at some point to tow an iceberg up to the Emirates so that you have a basis point, then you can build upon that. In your book, the iceberg was one of 20 solutions, plus than 20 solutions that you drafted. Is it the only one that you're pursuing, or do you have also other of these ideas that you intend to put into place?
We are pursuing several ideas. However, the iceberg, we are investing more time in the iceberg project, because we believe the quantity of water which can be harvested from iceberg is huge, which can mitigate the other resources, if you see what I mean. The benefits of having it can overweight any other solution we can propose currently in the market.
Very clear. And on the iceberg itself, what is going to be your next milestone?
Next milestone is to conclude the financial commercial part of it and establish the company with the help of our investors in order to start operation, hopefully by end of 2023, the pilot run, I'm saying. So hopefully our plan is like that. Unfortunately, last year we were due to organize a conference where we were planning to bring scientists and investors to the UAE, but unfortunately due to the corona issue, we stopped. And hopefully corona issue will go away and we can start the conference again. It's important that we learn from all scientists and we hear from them, and as well as investors, in order to make this project hopefully feasible, inshallah.
And aside from the financial topic, is there anything else which is preventing you from concluding the project?
Well, nothing much. The financial part is the main issue, which is not stopping us because we have signed and we have concluded with several interested investors and parties. So inshallah, hopefully the ball will roll fast, hopefully by next year, inshallah.
If I can give you my very personal opinion here, I'm really surprised that you don't get like 10 times the finance you need. Just because, when I'm looking at the projects which are out there and which are funded nowadays to solve the water crisis, I couldn't find a comparable one in terms of size. Because, I've been covering, for instance, atmospheric water generation on that microphone with Nafkar and Singbaga from ACVO. And it's an awesome solution, but it's not going to bring the level of water, the scale of water you can bring with an iceberg. And the iceberg project may be fully stupid. I don't want to offend you, but it may be. I mean, no one ever did it. But the risk involved when you're saying that bringing an iceberg to the Emirates would cost $120 to $200 million, it's not that much compared to the $4 trillion we have to invest if we want to meet the Sustainable Development Goal number 6 and to bring water for all. So it's exactly like you said in terms of ecological impact of the iceberg in the ocean, which is a drop in the ocean. I mean, financing an iceberg towing project seems, from what I've read, and I'm by no means an expert, but from what I've read, it seems to be a drop in the ocean. And if it works, it's a shift of paradigm almost. So I told you it's my very, very humble opinion, but I wish
I respect your opinion, my friend. I mean, of course, you have to start somewhere. I mean, we are talking about a serious issue here. Water shortage is about life or death of a humanity.
Absolutely.
It's not something nice to have. However, I mean, with our investors, they are convinced that from technical point of view, is a doable. It's not that difficult to operate. But hopefully, inshallah, of course, because it has never been done. That's why people with negative notes on it. But 100 years ago, maybe no one was stepping on the moon. But currently we have so many people going on the moon and walking on it. So this is much easier than going to the moon. I think the science is advanced big time to solve this issue very simply.
So maybe we can suggest to Jeff Bezos the next time, instead of going to the atmosphere with his spacecraft, he can invest the same ticket of money, and he can tow an iceberg actually, or finance the tow of an iceberg.
Correct. My friend, Antarctica is the water reserve for humanity. Currently, 10,000 trillion ton of fresh water is available there. It's a huge amount of water. And we're not going to go and cut any piece. We're going to drag, which is already disintegrated and will be wasted and melting. So I think the rationale behind it is logical and makes sense. I was invited by United Nations in 2019 to speak about the iceberg project as one of the unconventional water resource in Stockholm. From a technical point of view, the scientists and the people there were really amazed about it. So we believe it, so from a technical point of view, is not undoable.
So it seems like all the stars are aligned and it just needs a pioneer to be the first to move, which I wish you to be this first one. Abdulla, it was very pleasant to have that deep dive with you on that very fascinating topic. I would be very, very happy to have you back on that microphone as soon as you have hit your next milestone or you can announce that you've closed your financing round. So by any means, I would be very, very happy to follow up on that one. For now, if that's fine with you, I propose you to switch to the rapid fire questions to close our discussion today.
Yes, thank you, my friend, for having me today. Inshallah, why not?
It's time for the rapid fire questions.
So for the last section of our discussion today, I'm going to ask you very short questions and you can have very short answers. And my first short question will be, what is the most exciting project you've been working on and why?
What more than the iceberg project, Mike? I've traveled the four corners of the earth for this project. I've been to USA, to South Korea, Japan, to South Africa, UK, France. I think I've invested a lot of time and money into it. And I believe it will be done, inshallah.
What's your favorite part of your current job?
Creativity and innovation. I believe for any problem, there are many solutions, but we need to think outside the box.
It's interesting, and sorry to sidetrack here, but it's interesting because all the people that have seen working on the iceberg project, starting with John Isaacs in the 50s, or with Georges Mougin or John Hult from RAND, who wrote a big report on that, they all had this approach to say, if we do things like we've always done, then we get the same results that we always had. So this creativity aspect seems to be a common pattern among all the people who are looking at the topic.
Yeah, correct. Of course, we have to see from different angles. There is no problem without a solution, but we need to think positively and solve our issues with the outside thinking.
What is the trend to watch out in the water industry?
Well, there are many technologies, as you said before, like the water from air is an interesting as well technology to watch for. But unfortunately, the operating cost is huge as per my study. I hope, inshallah, they will make it cheaper for it to be feasible.
What is the thing you care about the most when you're working on a new project? And what is the one you care the least?
I care about the people who work with me, my team, of course, who without them you cannot achieve much. And I don't involve myself in, I can say, normal projects. I try to get involved in creative, innovative, and new projects. This makes me more satisfied, if you see what I mean.
Do you have sources to recommend to keep up with the water and wastewater market trends?
Well, George Mougin can be one. He's an encyclopedia for water. I met him and I learned a lot from him.
Well, and to close, I'll ask you the question that I usually ask at the very beginning of every interview, but I forgot because I was so excited to talk about icebergs with you. Can you send me a postcard from the place you're at? What can you tell me about the place you're at right now?
I'm in Dubai, my friend. I'm in Dubai currently, mashallah. The life is coming back to normal step by step, and hopefully we are welcoming Expo 2020 1 month to come now, and the entire world will be here. So I'm excited for the days, inshallah, October, when we will start Expo 2020 in Dubai. And you are most welcome as well, my friend, to come here.
Well, that would be with pleasure. Anyways, it has been an incredible pleasure to discuss with you today. And as I already said, I'd really like to follow up on your project, which is, I have to say, quite exciting. Thanks a lot, Abdulla.
Many thanks, my friend. Inshallah, hopefully we'll keep posted together, inshallah.
Thanks for listening to Don't Waste Water. This podcast was brought to you by GF Piping Systems. Loved this episode? Head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. See you next time.